I know that you all have been reading Garcia Peñas's The Borders of Dominicanidad, and so what I'm presenting today follows up on her research about how Dominican identity was constructed, but then brings in new research about how it's being deconstructed and reshaped aesthetically. When I use the word aesthetics, I'm talking about in terms of art, in terms of ways like self-presentation, in terms of fashion, in terms of style, music, and those are other domains of aesthetics, but I personally focus on like self-presentation and beauty culture, and so that's what I'll be talking about today. I'll be exploring, and I also actually want to present the flow of my presentation today. So I'm going to have an introduction to natural hair in the Afro-diaspora, and specifically black hair, and this concept of aesthetic citizenship in the Afro-diaspora. I'm going to also have some thoughts about natural hair as embodied in everyday protest. We're going to listen to everybody know Melissa Harris Perry, the very well-known journalist. So we're going to have some information from Melissa Harris Perry about the significance of natural hair in the U.S. So that really kind of contextualizes my own research in the Dominican Republic, and I'll explain why. Then we're going to move into thinking about what is the broader socio-political context of natural hair in the Dominican Republic. Where is this movement, if we can call it that, movement, fitting into in terms of the politics of race in the Dominican Republic? As you all by now have read, it's a really complex territory for how race and ethnicity have been articulated to create nationality. From there, we're going to look at the politics of natural hair in the Dominican Republic, and we're going to do some exercises around the story of a young woman named Nicky and her case of discrimination, so we can sort of understand what are some of the challenges around, first of all, just wearing natural hair, and then second of all, then turning that into a politicized identity that's also claiming rights for people in the country. Does everybody know what a meme is? I don't want to assume. So that's great. This is great. So we're going to actually explore memes as a tool for social justice activism, and I'm going to actually have us all do some exercises around deconstructing the meaning of memes and how they actually operate. So by the time you walk out of this class, you will be able to understand what a meme is and understand sort of the logic of it that make it like make a meme go viral or make it significant or even funny. So I saw some of that in my field site. I'm very interested in digital culture and all that, and you'll see as I present my work. Then from that, we're going to go into thinking about aesthetic citizenship on social media. So thinking about how, I'm giving the example of 3 natural hair bloggers in the Dominican Republic and the ways that they've been constructing an identity around natural hair and the significance of that. Finally, I want to talk about the challenges to and the limits of natural hair in the DR as a politicized identity and as also as a potential social movement. So where does this sort of break down, or what are some of the challenges and limits to it that I actually will be exploring when I go back to the field beginning in May, more like June of this coming 2018. So does that sound cool with y'all? Okay, great. So let's keep going. So I'll just keep going and kind of integrate things as we come along. So the first part of my presentation discusses the introduction to hair politics in the Afro-diaspora, and I want to start with some videos about natural hair and the significance of natural hair for Afro-descendants. So I'm just going to go right into that. And this video is called Our Heritage. It's a natural hair documentary that was released last year.
Brother here, myself, all of us were born with our hair like this, and we just wear it like this because it's natural. Because the reason for it, you might say, is like a new awareness among black people that their own natural appearance, physical appearance, is beautiful and pleasing to them. Because black people are aware, and white people are aware of it too. Because white people now want natural wigs. They want wigs like this. Dig it? Isn't it beautiful? All right.
I think it's long overdue. I think it's very long overdue. I think that it never should have taken a step back from the 70s. It should have just continued to move. And just the fact that we even have a natural movement now, it shouldn't be called a movement. It should just take place. It should have never stopped taking place from the 70s. I can't imagine imagine what our culture would be like if, everything had been the same from that point on. I think that there would be a lot more positivity going on in our culture, so I hope that it's just the start of something great.
So the reason why I really like this short video is that it really gets at the history of natural hair in the U.S. And so when I think of natural hair, I want to point out that across the globe, natural hair, so this trend of, not just a trend, but a lifestyle of wearing hair curly or braided or in locks or an afro, follows from earlier 1960s social movements, the civil rights movement, which flowed into the Black Power movement, which also gave birth to the Black arts movement. And so this trend of natural hair has been significant for African American cultural life, and has now also become like a global trend. And so some of the numbers that are coming out, journalist Makita Easter writes that 71% of Black adults wore their hair natural at least once in 2016. And so that's a figure, and given that $2.5 billion were spent by Black people on hair products last year, that means that a huge significant amount of that number is actually being spent on natural hair care products, right? And so there's some numbers around like Black spending on hair straighteners, which has fallen significantly. And I think that it's important to pause and think about what that means in terms of the idea of aesthetic citizenship, right? And so since enslavement, the politics of natural hair have been significant, or the politics of hair in general have been significant for Afro-descendants, given that those whose bodies were aesthetically closer to white standards of beauty have historically had more access to social privileges, like things like being able to have a job application put forth in the job market and not experiencing discrimination around that job application. Things like just like very interpersonal experiences with racism and discrimination, right? These politics have been present for a very long time. And so natural hair reverses a trend of wanting to be closer, aesthetically closer to whiteness in the Afro diaspora. And this significantly challenges Eurocentric beauty norms that dictate that Afro-descendants should change their physical appearance to fit into the societies in which they live. And so this idea of aesthetic citizenship is this idea that in order to fit within the society where you live, you must approximate a white standard of beauty. And so the philosopher Charles Taylor writes that, quote, instead of entering the new world as the animals that they were thought to be, unadorned, unmarked by the self-conscious creation of meaning, Africans and their descendants found essentially common cause in the essentially human act of self-fashioning, right? So this idea that through self-fashioning, through style, through hair, through embodiment, through clothing, through music, through these different cultural and artistic expressions, you could actually reclaim some humanity, right? And so this is where people consider natural hair to be deeply politicized, right? And so I want to actually flow into the next video because it really kind of covers and attempts to understand why is it that this trend, or not trend, but lifestyle is seen as so politicized for some people, right? We already have a sense of that from the history of the Black Power movement and the images of people like Kathleen Cleaver or Angela Davis. But now in present day, there's also questions around whether this is political or not. So I want to actually show the second video that I have. This is just a minute long, so bear with me.
Have this conversation. For me, Black women's hair, the politics of it seem obvious. But I realize that it may not be obvious to everyone, particularly maybe to our viewers who haven't encountered things like this before. Help me make the case for why Black hair matters. It matters because it's a historical way that we've looked at each other. From the time of slavery forward, hair has been a very big deal, whether you wore your hair in a certain kind of style, somebody took their hair away from you, or you go into the 20th century where we have Madam C.J. Walker, who comes up with a process to straighten your hair. Everybody gets happy about that. And then we have black women Pentecostal saying, don't straighten your hair. So when you get to the 60s and you want to do black power and you want to wear your afro, and your mother tells you you can't wear an afro, all of those things become very political. So when we see natural hair, it's something very different. It seems that we're making a kind of a statement, even if we're not making a statement. It seems a political statement to those who are on the outside, and to those who are on the interior. It says we want to accept ourselves the way we are, for who we are. And it feels like there's no hairstyle you can choose.
Okay, so this idea that self-acceptance is political has increasingly become normalized, right? I think that the context of this conversation, which was her statement was so powerful, the context of that conversation is the work of black feminist theorists like Audre Lorde, people who have politicized this idea that the personal, like your everyday acts of how you choose to dress, the way you speak, these kind of micro expressions are political in a broader context when we think of them in a broader historical and social context. Cool. So now we can move into natural hair in the Dominican Republic. So I already sort of talked about this idea of aesthetic citizenship, the idea that belonging is determined by your self-expression, which is linked to race and proximity to whiteness. So I want to think about more contextually, what is the broader socio-political context in which natural hair fits in the Dominican Republic? I think by now, I think that many people are understanding that there are many, many Afro-descendants who live outside of the United States. Only a certain amount of enslaved people arrived to the U.S., and the large majority went to Latin America. And so the Dominican Republic, as you've been reading, is one of these majority Afro-descendant countries. 85% of the population is Afro-descendant. But I want to think about this picture, and I want to sort of ask you all for your reactions to this picture and what you think it indexes, right? When you look at this image, right, this image I took myself in the colonial zone of Santo Domingo last summer. And I want to do some analysis of that, right? I do visual anthropology, so I'm very interested. And I want to do some analysis of that to keep this interactive. So when you look at this image, what do you think the message that is being sent actually is? Don't all jump up.
Feel free to point to somebody.
No, I will let them. So don't be shy. There's no right or wrong answers. This is your meaning-making process. Yes?
Well, it looks like both girls don't have the same hair, even though that's like not how the Afro-descendant girl's hair would probably look if it weren't like treated or like made a certain way.
Yeah.
Standard.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. What's your name?
Liam.
Liam, thank you, Liam. Anybody want to build on what Liam said? Yes?
I think that it's like the name that showing that straight hair is standard and that like there are a lot of differences between them, but there are some things that stay the same. Like all the girls should like dresses and all the girls should have straight hair, but it was just showing that that's
Yeah, great. Thank you. What's your name? Kayla. Thank you, Kayla. Yeah, so Kayla is bringing forth also like the gender dimension of the image too, right? That all little girls should have, and notice the should, right? That's where the idea of a social norm comes in. It's unspoken, but it's what should be happening. They should both have straight hair despite the fact that their complexions are very different, and they should also both be, gendered as girls wearing dresses, right?
I think also because it's so young, it really contributes to this idea that like they're not actively making this decision to wear their hair that way. It's like indoctrinated into society that you will look a certain way. Like you're not deciding later in life like this is how I want my hair to look, so I'm going to do something to it. they're, even from, you know, this young of an age, they're kind of treated like this is how you should look.
Thank you. What's your name?
Emery.
Thank you, Emery. Yeah, this idea of like socialization that happens very early on, right? As early as, I don't know, like 4, 5, 3 years old, you know, girls are already having their hair straightened for a variety of reasons. And that's the image that pervades. And I don't have a lot of images of like Dominican media, but it's very evident that that is the expectation, right? As it is the case in many places. So I want to think about some of the internal and external factors that are driving the fact that natural hair can even become a possibility for Dominican women and Dominican men as well. As you read in the book, we're talking about a society that has not had necessarily like a Black Power movement that has been popularized per se, or like a Black arts movement, and I'll explain why that is. We're talking about a society that still clings, like the structures or like the power structure of it, the state still very much clinges to an idea of normative whiteness, right? Even though, as you have read in Jorge Garcia Peñas' book, there are a lot of efforts by cultural producers to show and present art and other images that are not this normative image. And so I think that it would be remiss, or it would be, you know, unacceptable for me to not talk about the fact that natural hair is occurring as a phenomenon in the context of the denationalization of Dominicans of Haitian descent in the Dominican Republic, right? And so, you know, as you read in Jorge Garcia Peñas' book, a massacre occurred in 1937 where the Dominican state murdered not only Haitians on the border, but also mixed Dominican Haitian people and some Dominicans who were dark-skinned. And so that history still sits within the foundation of Dominican society, and it has unfortunately allowed the state to denationalize, take away the citizenship of people who have lived in the DR for many generations, who are of Haitian descent, and their children. So it would be the equivalent of somebody saying, my parents came here when they were young, and they had me here, for example, and I am no longer a U.S. citizen. So any parent that is from another country who had a child here, that child is no longer a citizen of their state, right? And so this is what happened in the DR in 2013. And it was a context of a lot of, essentially, the critical attention to how institutional racism perpetrates inequality in the DR, right? So that is sort of the parallel to natural hair in the Dominican Republic right now. This movement to reclaim the citizenship, to regain the citizenship of Dominicans of Haitian descent. And so it would be unfortunate if I didn't mention that is also what's going on. And so I think that one of the key points in Jorge Garcia Peñas' book is that this massacre, affected the lives of Haitian, Dominican Haitians, and also Dominicans, right? So if we think about institutional racism as affecting specifically Haitians, right, but also flowing into other areas of public life. So not only do we have an impact on this group, but it also radiates, right, to other parts of society, to other people in society. So anyone choosing to kind of diverge away from the aesthetic norm of straight hair and also a certain gender norm will be punished in some way or another, right? And that's what we're going to explore today. So, let's see. Other examples of the kind of institutional discrimination that I'm talking about that directly impact women who wear their hair natural, who also may be of Haitian descent, right? These women may also be of Haitian descent, as they might be of Dominican descent. Right? Natural hair kind of blurs the nationality boundaries that have been very strict. Dominican women look like this. They have straight hair and they're lighter skinned. But what happens when a Dominican woman has darker skin and she has curly or braided hair? She kind of like blends the dynamics that have been established. And that's very challenging. And so in other examples of the ways that racial discrimination affect the lives of these women include the fact that bank tellers at the nation's banks cannot wear natural hair. Many stories abound on social media about people who have been denied service at public institutions. So imagine that you're, going to take your child to school and your child has an afro or braids, and they're told that they cannot go to school that day unless they go home and change. Or the story that we're going to explore later on is the story of someone who was denied a scholarship for their hair and had to essentially appeal to the media for help. We're also talking about this policing tactic that one of my informants told me about last summer. He told me that in the working class neighborhoods of the city, when the police come, they pick up young men and they put them on a truck and they shave their head on their spot. So like imagine as a policing tactic, and it's like standard practice that if someone has braids or if someone has natural hair, they'll just shave their hair, really violating someone's dignity. Because as we have learned, these acts of aesthetic citizenship are people's self-expression. And so these are the sorts of things that I've heard about that are happening. And I also myself was experienced some discrimination when I had box braids in the field. So that was interesting. Another example that became very prominent is the fact that when you go to take your citizenship ID card, everybody has to have a citizenship ID card in the DR. Women were told to go comb their hair or straighten their hair before they could have their photo taken. And so they were also being just denied access to basic paperwork. And that became a big problem for people. And so, despite these very many documented cases of all manner of institutional racism, the Dominican Republic government still denies the presence of racism in the country. So in their official kind of documents, they will say that there is no such thing as racism here, and that structural discrimination doesn't exist. And unfortunately, there's a lack of scholarship also showing that there is institutional racism. So we actually need young scholars like yourselves to take on that work of looking at institutional racism in the country. And so I'm going to read a line from a UN report from 2001 that says, "We express worry due to the affirmation in the periodic report in which the Dominican Republic states that no racial prejudice exists and that the state has never considered it necessary to condemn racial discrimination in the sense expressed by this convention. No country can affirm that in its territory no discrimination exists or be sure that no other forms of discrimination will arise in the future." And so the state itself just has no interest in addressing this problem. I visited the Office of Human Rights. It's very small and underfunded. It's literally in a small closet. And no one goes to visit because people don't trust that the government will actually take action on discrimination. And so that's sort of the context where women's activism is sort of taking place. And so another aspect of Gloria Garcia Peñas' book that I love, I'm a really big fan of hers. She's really cool. But another aspect of her book that I really love is that she really is thinking about transnationalism. Transnationalism is this idea that people are flowing through borders, people and ideas are flowing through borders, information is flowing through borders, and that's really shifting how people understand their national and self-identity, right? Especially with the rise of digital media, you really have significant shifts to how identity is being constructed, right? I mean, raise your hands, how many of you follow Instagram accounts or Facebook accounts that are not in the U.S., that are outside of the U.S.? Okay. And that's probably how you receive some of your news and other perspectives that might not be, kind of what's present in your news normally. And so the same thing is happening in the Dominican Republic. And there are these interesting changes that are happening. People are actually beginning to migrate back to the DR, right? Instead of people, specifically second generation, people who were born here in the U.S., are beginning to go back to the DR to establish their own sort of lives there. And they're bringing with them a sense of identity and politics that is very different from what the people in the Dominican Republic have been socialized to understand, historically socialized to understand. And so one of those people is Carolina Contreras. She's one of my primary informants, and she has started a movement called Yo Amo Mi Pajon, I Love My Poofy Curly Hair. And she also has one of the first natural hair salons in the Dominican Republic. And we're gonna like dive into her Instagram account in a little bit, because it's very interesting how she's mobilizing her platform around natural hair. And so Carolina was raised in Boston, spent some time between the DR and New York and Boston, and she actually recently went back to the DR in the beginning of the decade. I can't believe I'm saying that. In the beginning of this decade, that's quickly coming to an end, she migrated back to the DR with little money and essentially created a blog to document her hair transition from processed hair to natural hair, a blog in Spanish. It was the first blog in Spanish for Latin American women who were transitioning to natural hair. And so that was a big, big deal because information like this was just not available, right? And so, you fast forward like 6 years later, she's become super successful. Her salon is always busy. She has become a major entrepreneur and has plans to open a salon in New York City very soon. And so it's really interesting to hear her story and to see that like this pattern of transnational exchange that you read about in this book, like there are real people actually doing that. And they're really shifting how race can be stood in the country. Cool. And we can go into the next section. This is a photo that I really love of a gathering. This is Carolina right here. And this is the kind of community that's being gathered in the DR in ways that just have not happened in the past. Communities of Black women actually gathering around a common Black or at least like Afro curly hair identity. And I think it's very complex that this is not necessarily the type of like Black power movement that you would read about in a book in the 60s, right? It's actually a movement around hair. And the way that me and Carolina have talked about it is that it's a process of translation, right? It's the only way that you could get people to buy into this idea of self-love and self-expression and Black aesthetics, right? And so while it's not a movement that is necessarily using the same language that's being used here in the US, like for example, hashtag Black Lives Matter, this is kind of like her translation, her culturally sensitive translation of like Black Girl Magic, Black Lives Matter into a Dominican context where it might seem depoliticized when compared to other movements, but it is what is available at the moment, right? Due to like the institutional barriers and the amount of just socialization around anti-Blackness that has happened historically, this is like her translation of her experiences.
And also the denial of race in the DR.
Right.
Which is what we talked about.
Exactly. Yeah, like the denial that like there's a possibility that you could be Afro, like African descendant and Dominican at the same time. That is like very revolutionary, right? And like very threatening. Like I actually have received threats from people for writing about that topic. It's very, very, very disconcerting to people in the Dominican Republic. So transnationalism helps, but not when you're receiving threats on your Facebook account from people who don't even live here. So that's not a good time. But, it just goes to show the power that, this book has and the power that this movement has that is really kind of getting a lot of attention and traction. And so in this section, I really want to think about what happens when hair becomes explicitly political in the Dominican Republic. So as we might recall from the Melissa Harris Perry video earlier, hair for Black women is not always political. Sometimes it can just be an act of fashion and styling. But through meaning making, right, we as humans have the capacity to give meaning to and interpret whatever situations are happening, right? So through this process of interpretation, hair in the DR has become highly political, right? And so before launching into the significance of the story that I'm about to share with you all, I want to say that this Black aesthetics movement is not the first time that something like this has attempted to happen or take off in the DR, right? Through my research, very preliminary research about the 60s and 70s, there was like a Black aesthetics movement influenced by Black power, right? The thing is that these movements were essentially derided as being like pro-Haitian, right? And so there was a movement to valorize like Afro-Dominican religions, which Lord Garcia talks about in her book, right? There was that movement to bring value to like a mix of Christianity, Catholicism, and also African traditions. But that's been historically dismissed as like Haitian tradition, right? Same thing with movements to valorize like dance and cultural forms it's called Gaga or Rara in Creole. But that also has historically been dismissed as just Haitian, right? In 1994, there were attempts to elect a very progressive black Haitian descendant man named Jose Peña Gomez. And there was a massive anti-Peña Gomez campaign that painted him as Haitian and therefore threatening to sovereignty, threatening to the Dominican state. And he did not win that election. It was solely from him. And that's something that is also part of the history. So there's already a history of dismissing anything that is related to Afro-descendancy as being Haitian. And that's a huge challenge. And we're going to see how it shows up when someone actually publicly expresses that there is a sense of discrimination in the country. So this story happened this past summer. This young woman's name is Nicky Gonzalez. She is a young political science student. And on a morning in July of last year, she went to petition for a scholarship at the Higher Education Ministry in the Dominican Republic. So in the DR, in order to get any kind of advancement, like scholarships or any kind of socioeconomic advancement, it's about who you know, right? So this woman went to petition, imagine like a court, and you go and petition to the person in power to potentially consider your application. So she went to do that. It's very normal. And so she went to the Higher Education Ministry, and she was confronted with this woman named Ligia Madamelo, who's the minister in charge of that office. So imagine someone in charge of a U.S. ministry. She went to talk to that person. And the woman reportedly said, I don't give scholarships to people with hair like yours. And she didn't say curly hair or an afro, but it was clear that she was referencing her hair. And this is actually the morning of when this happened. So that immediately was interpreted as being discriminatory of her hair, and it had huge implications that people interpreted on social media. So I actually received a call from Nicky at 9 a.m. on July 26th. I worked as a receptionist at the salon, and errand girl and receptionist. But I received a call from Nicky, and she actually was crying when she spoke to me, and she said that she really needed to speak with Carolina. Carolina is known as an activist, someone that you can appeal to, and who has a lot of power on social media to bring input into a specific case. But Carolina wasn't in the office that day, so I took down her details and I passed it on to Carolina via text message, right? This was 9 a.m. By 5 p.m., Nicky's story was everywhere. It was on WhatsApp groups that women in the salon follow. It was on Facebook. It was in the local news. It had sort of blown up. It became a media event that day. And so she could not get any witnesses to verify what had happened, because speaking out against the minister would mean that you would get denied a scholarship too. So she couldn't bring this case to court. She couldn't file an official complaint. Nobody would testify for her, because they understood that if you put your name on a piece of paper, you would then be completely shunned later on. And so what ended up happening is that Nicky's case, since it wasn't going to go anywhere institutionally, there wasn't going to be any court case, was taken up by members of a group called Acción Afro-Dominicana, who were activists, who then wrote a document around discrimination in higher ed, and brought it forth, right? They had this, I can actually show you, giving away my presentation. Sorry. So they had this document here, and they had a rally. It was a little bit after the event. It was on August 11th, I actually wasn't in the field by that point. I would have gone to the rally if I was. But this says no more racism in the Dominican education system. We invite you to give a document to the Minister of Higher Education and the Minister of Education. So it's like a document that had collected many signatures that was advocating for a shift in how Dominican education system teaches about race and how it features Afro-descendant people. It's another story of what exactly happened when they went to give that. They were actually like physically assaulted and like had to be ushered out of the premises. So it was not, this is like something that was happening to Afro-descendant women who are claiming their rights in the DR. So that's another story. And so one of the things that I found to be very interesting about Nicky's story was like the popular reception, right? Because stories like this abound. I think this one was significant because it was like a minister, like it was like an institution that represents the country, right? But it happens all the time at restaurants. It happens all the time at public schools. But this was more significant. And so people tried to dismiss Nicky as pro-Haitian. They said she had been to Haiti once because she's from the border region. And so they had like immediately dismissed her as being pro-Haitian. They said that she was affiliated with the party in power that has been in power and is significantly corrupt. And so that dismissed her claims as well. So they tried to really use all these different discourses, all these ways of framing her story to be dismissive of the fact that this was a case of significant discrimination. And so people immediately responded to this in a really unique way that I want to like think about and think with you all. They started creating these like memes on social media to like bring attention to the issue, right? So this idea of like actually using a meme as a technique for activism and social justice was something that really kind of popped out at me because her story mostly circulated on social media. And her story is significant because it just kind of opens a window into how race is highly problematic for institutional life in the Dominican Republic. And so, in this case, like hashtag campaigns were started, but I really want to focus on the memes that are like visual examples of how people were activating and thinking through this case. And so, I wanted to find a meme because it's not like common knowledge what that actually is. So this idea of the meme is defined by Aria Green as a term that has evolved. Right? Meme actually reference to like a repetitive action that like is being patterned over and over and done over and over again. But that idea has been translated to digital culture. So a meme, once used to describe ideas or behaviors that were passed from person to person, so like style or fashion or something like that. But now a meme refers metonomically to internet memes, which are trope-filled, so they have these like very kind of significant visual ideas and visual elements that are indexical. That means that they signal to things, to ideas that like are commonly held knowledge, right? They're easy to make. I can make a meme like right now, if I wasn't giving this presentation on my phone. And I'm sure you could too, right? So like it's very accessible. It's not, very high tech. You don't have to code a meme or something like that. And they also use stock imagery. They're like known for like being kind of like patchworky looking, kind of unprofessional looking. And they can be funny, right? Or like kind of ironic. Like the funniest memes are like the kind of ironic, funny ones. So you're like, this is kind of interesting, let me like look at this. And you gain some meaning out of it. And they often like use like text and images. That's kind of like, it has a collage effect. And so what I want us to do, which will be fun, is to like think about some of the memes that kind of came out to point to like the absurdity of race relations in the DR. And so the way that I think would be useful to do this is to like kind of like think through like some of the elements of this meme. But before I do that, I actually should explain two ideas that are kind of significant. So this idea of like juxtaposition, so you have like images against each other, which we'll see, or like elements, visual elements, juxtaposing comparatively against each other. And then you also have this idea of intersectionality, which I won't kind of like dive into too much because I don't have the meme that exemplifies that, so I'm not gonna like put us through that. This idea that like texts are like referencing each other. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Okay, great. Awesome. Yeah. So it's like, for the way that I understand metonyms is like, it's a poetic term, but it kind of references it, like, I think the way that the author is using it is like something that like references that thing specifically. Yeah, the part that stands for the whole. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, so like memes are, you know, they can be like actions or they can be internet digital things, but now like that internet digital thing stands for all memes. That's what it signifies. Thank you. So the first one that I want to look at has multiple elements. It's got the text, right? The text reads, looking for scholarship at the Minister for Higher Ed and Tech Starter Pack. And I love how, you know, okay, I'm not going to say anything. I want you all to break it down. So, knowing what we know about memes, right, they have all these elements. I want to just kind of like flash back to it again, right? They have like the metanym, or they have the trope, right, the visual trope or the linguistic tropes, right? They have like the imagery. They also like have like funny slash absurdist slash ironic kind of elements to them. So like you all have those tools now. Got it? Is there anything that I should define one more time? Trope. So I mean, the way that I understand a trope is something that is kind of like a symbol that is like socially significant to a group of people who would understand what that might be, right? So like your membership in the group might be defined because you can understand that trope and you can read that trope, right? And so I always say not everything is for everybody, right? And so if you can understand the tropes, then you can become part of that, have the language to access what this means, right? So there are some things that might not be comprehensible or like make any meaning for some people, and that's okay, right? And so this is the first one, and I just want to point out, or like let you all kind of point out what are some, if you understand, what are some of the tropes that are in this meaning? What are some of the elements you recognize? Yeah. Huh? How do you know that? Great. So those are tropes, right? Visual tropes. The index, you gotta have straight hair, right? It's always good to know. How do I know what I know, right? Like, how do I know that that's what that means, right?
How do I know what I know? That's our magic theme in this class.
Yeah. How do I know what I know, right? What's your name? Jose. Josette. Okay, thank you, Josette. Yeah.
Is it like fair skin and comfortable? I think about L'Oreal thing face cream. Like
Yeah. Yeah, so this is White Perfect. This is a Pond's like clearing cream, and this is like the naturally clearing Nivea cream, right? And these are widely sold, you know. Anyone else? Any other tropes? Yeah.
So I have like a common book for like starter pack. So it's all like stuff that you need to do something, and I was looking for that and like the how to find the scholarship trope. So you have to do all these things to get through that.
Got it. Yeah, great. Thank you so much. And what was your name?
Cheryl.
Cheryl. Okay, and your name?
Kayla.
Kayla. Thank you both. Yeah, so this idea of like a starter pack, right? It's become kind of like trendy, and so you might see those like on social media, like the NYU starter pack might have like an orange cup of coffee and a MacBook and an ID card or something like that, right? This idea of like, this is what you do to belong to this type of thing, right? That was great, y'all. Let's move on. This is so much fun. Okay, so this is the ministering question, right? And those, is it Cheryl? Cheryl? Yeah, do you want to Google Kayla, Cheryl, Kayla, just say Kayla, Cheryl, okay. Do you want to Google Translate for us?
Oh, I actually know that one.
You know that one. Okay.
If you don't give scholarships to people with
Yeah. Right, so what are some of the kind of like common approach that you see in this meme? How is this meme functioning? How does it make any meaning? How does it make sense? Yeah. What's your name?
The fact that they like Photoshop a blow dryer in her hand is sort of showing like what she's expecting to do in order to like be considered for a scholarship, but it's obviously like an exaggeration and like an interpretation of what she's saying.
Awesome.
Like they put scholarship on the hair dryer as like a direct correlation to like what's happening in the university.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. What's your name? Naima. Thank you, Naima. So, okay, let's keep digging. Let's keep digging, right? What else we got? What else we got? There's like more meaning in this meme, which is why I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, you see this there photos as like you get a lot of chairs, like a social behind, but it gives them, you know, like higher education and like maybe whether like someone who is running you're on scholarship, but like having that like the higher like authoritative figures of such like a prestigious institution. So and like that, like at the end of the day there's just that challenge.
Yeah, thank you. What's your name? Michael. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, it's highly significant that they like Photoshop this like very official looking image, right, of this woman. It was not by accident that they chose that image. They could have chosen something else, but they chose this. What else we got? Yes.
So, going off of the image they chose, her facial expression is also very condescending. So even without knowing like what it says above, you can kind of see, you can feel the disapproval in the picture.
That's great. I actually hadn't thought about that, but yeah, that's also great. What's your name?
Lily?
Killy?
Lily.
Lily. Okay, Lily. Okay, awesome. Let's keep digging. What else we got? Yeah.
The way I see it, based on the expression and the positioning of the hairdryer, the hairdryer kind of resembles, in my opinion, like a gun. And I don't know if you ever watched Narcos.
Yeah.
You know, the family of the series, like Cartel Slomo. And the illustration just gives me that sort of like, you know, you either like trim your hair or you don't get this scholarship, you know, like that kind of.
Yeah, it's threatening, right? It's
Yeah.
threatening. I've never thought about hair blow dryers as a gun, but that's great. That's really rich. What else we got? Anybody else? There's one more kind of like significant thing about this that makes it ironic. Like, you know, in order for things to become popular and viral, they gotta have some element of irony or interest, right? Like, that's how things kind of work. So let's see, what is the one thing about this, right? This has all been so great, and there's more. Isn't that amazing?
I don't know if I'm this is a reach, but is her hair blow dried?
Her hair is blow dried.
Okay, so maybe it's sort of like a hypocrisy there.
Yeah, people pointed that out, how hypocritical of her to not accept this young woman when clearly she also is engaging in, you know, this kind of whitening practices. Yeah. So I want to read the text again. We don't give scholarships to people with hair like yours. We don't give scholarships to people with hair like yours. And the blow dryer here is the scholarship, right? So someone with natural hair made this meme because it signifies that we don't give blow dryers to people with hair like yours. Does that make sense? Is that kind of like jail for people? No? Okay, so I'll explain it again. So the top quote says, we don't give scholarships, right? Beca is the blow dryer, to people with hair like yours. Right? Okay, I think I said that, right?
Fine, I got it.
Anybody want to take a stab at it? Oh, no, that sounds violent. Anybody want to take a guess? Yes.
I think it's basically saying that you should already have straight
What's your name? Nella. So that's one really good reading, right? We don't have if you don't come correct, right? If you don't come presenting, you're not gonna get the scholarship, right? And then there's another alternative meaning. So let's think about that one. Yeah.
I'm not so sure, but like I was thinking of like the book as a tool to like access like another like social classes. So like by them blocking that access, like blocking the ability for her to straighten her hair, then she would be able to like reach the same status as everyone else. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that gels. I like that. I think those two go together really well. What's your name? Divine. Thank you, Divine. Yeah.
I was gonna say because I know like I have 14 hair, so I know that nothing like a blow dryer is not gonna get 14 hair straight. So it's kind of like what I became given speaking that you need to start off before you even got here is where it needs to be. So like why would we get to start?
Got it. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
It's kind of like the hair straightener is like the hair like the aspect of the scholarship, but it's like if you want the scholarship, like you have to like use the hair straightener. So it's like if it's enough to give something.
Thank you. What's your name? Thank you, Celia. Yeah, so that's a really, really great reading, right? These are all really, really great readings. I'm loving what you all are sharing because it really deconstructs something that, like, on the surface, like, was very simple. Right? How many times a day do we not see memes on social media, whatever? But think of all the thought that it went into making this object, and think of all the meaning we've been able to draw from it. Yeah.
It almost seems like, since you said it was made by somebody with natural hair, it almost seems like a reclamation, kind of like, I'm going to turn this thing on its head and flip it, like, oh, you said I can't get this scholarship because I wear my hair naturally, well, I'm just going to take pride in wearing the natural hair, and, like, I feel like it's almost saying, like, you shouldn't need this blow dryer to feel fulfilled.
Yeah, or to gain access, right? Yeah, that's great. What's your name?
Spencer.
Spencer. Thank you, Spencer. Yeah, it's both of those meanings, right? Like, if you want the scholarship, we're not going to give you the access. You got to do the work, right? You have to change your self-presentation. And from the other perspective of somebody who does wear natural hair, who is part of this community, that we're going to see, it's saying, like, you know, the idea that this is the scholarship, the blow dryer is a scholarship. We don't give scholarships to people with hair like yours. We don't give blow drying. We don't give like straightening to hair like yours, right? So it actually exactly does what you're telling me. It kind of turns it on its head and like reclaims the image, right? And says, no, actually, we don't really want it. It's fine. We don't want blow drying. We don't want to have to pass your aesthetic standards, right? And ultimately, you know, she didn't get the scholarship, right? Which is really unfortunate. But at the same time, it was a reclamation for a lot of people of like, okay, we don't have to abide by your standards. So look at how far we got, everybody, with one image, right? We went from like deconstructing the actual elements, like the text and the images, and what was photoshopping and what was not, to understanding kind of like the ideologies, two different ideologies that you could get from this one object. So that's very interesting. And do we have time for one more or no? Oh, it's 1:33. So.
I know you're going to have some questions. So
Yeah.
Factor that in.
Okay, we'll like do a very quick one. One of my faves. So this is playing with her name. Her name is Ligia Amada Melo. Are there any Spanish speakers in the room? Raise your hands high. Yeah, okay. So does anybody want to kind of like work with, right, what is happening linguistically with this meme that makes it funny? No pressure. Yeah. Yeah, these are like the benefits of, right, of like abiding by her standards. You look European instantly. This is supposed to be, this is a trope for what? This bottle is a trope for what? Huh?
Like bleaching cream, or is it like hair?
It could be both. We don't really know. It doesn't say. But it could be bleaching cream or it could be hair cream, right? It could be both, right? Yeah.
Well, talking about like the risk of using it, it's like it might stain and it might cause like hair to like thin out or fall out and it's like so you'll be like encouraged your mind to get tired of
Yeah. So this one says ideal, the first one says ideal for bad hair. You look European instantly. These are like the benefits. It says also put it in your eyes because they instantly will look blue and it might burn a little bit and you might be blind. Right? So this is, so, you know, and if you're one of the first people to order, you will get 5 scholarships to study abroad. So somebody was really thinking about like, well, somebody, in order to understand this meaning, they have to know some information. Yeah.
So, like just on that note, I think it's like also how it says 100% European, but she doesn't look 100% European. And then on the other hand, I think it's important that it says like receive 5 scholarships for study abroad in Spain, because Spain is like this sort of like ideal of like the white like Hispanic ideal, and so instead of it could have been like study abroad in like Costa Rica or something like that, but it says Spain, so I think that's really significant as far as the ideal that like a product like this would try to achieve.
Thank you. What's your name? Thank you, Nella. I didn't realize you had like 120 cultural critics in the room.
I told you this class is awesome.
That's great. No, yeah, that's super significant, right? So, like, there's some themes right here, right? Like, in order to understand this, you would have to understand what it is to actually get your hair chemically straightened. It burns. Hint. It burns. And it's unrealistic for the idea that you automatically look European, right? That's not realistic. And this idea of the trope of like the blue eyes, if anybody has read in high school or college, Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, I think that like really is significant that it's not green or whatever eyes. It's significant that it's blue eyes, right? These are some. This is kind of like some of the cultural work that was happening around this phenomena with Nicky, right? But my favorite part of this meme is actually somewhere else, and it has to do with language. And I want to know if anyone can like quickly like take a kind of like guess about what it might mean. Yes.
Well, I think like the title that you know kind of like it was obviously advertising a relaxer cream, and so it almost sounds like it's gonna like relax mellow or like trying to like calm down about the hair when I first read it, and kind of like making this big deal out of natural hair, and it's like
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, that's exactly, the name of the cream is Desriza Melo, which in Spanish would be, it translates to straighten it, basically. But because her last name is Melo, they took that part of her name, right, and fit that into the verb, right, in Spanish, to signal her, right? So they kind of like fit her into the meme, linguistically playing on her name. And that's very creative and very interesting. And that's why some of these were able to circulate so widely. And your reading is also very interesting. Like, relax, lady. Like, it is not a big deal. People wear their hair natural now. And that's totally acceptable. So, I mean, I hope that this was fun. I had a lot of fun. And, you know, I'm a big fan of, like, digital culture. We're going to go into Instagram right now. But this is the kind of, like, from below kind of cultural work that's happening all the time, right? It's happening all the time. And that goes under the radar unless we have the tools to, like, be able to read it and understand what are some of the ideologies and some of the ideas that are embedded within that, right? And there's a reason why these circulated so widely. for things to circulate, they have to have currency, they have to have value, and the value comes from the juxtaposition, the intersexuality, the tropes that are being mobilized. Was that fun? I think that was very fun. So nerdy. Cool, so I think with the last few minutes that I have, I'll just sort of like dive into a few Instagram accounts very quickly so you all can get a sense of like what's happening. This past weekend was the first ever Afro Fair in the Dominican Republic, and that's something that has never happened before, and it was so exciting. So I'm just gonna go ahead and show you photos from that so you can kind of have a sense of what this community of women and men looks like. These are some images. Let me make them bigger. This is from Carolina. You can find her at Mestizos. That's her account. And so these are some images from the fair this weekend. These are some really well-known bloggers, actually. And there's a lot of excitement around events like this, right? Periodically, bloggers will have like gatherings, so this is the biggest one that they've ever had. And I guess there's a video, which is awesome. But I don't know that we'll have time to watch the video. But yeah, these are some of the images. So an entire kind of industry, an entire care industry, an entire blogging industry, entrepreneurship around distribution of products, right? You can't just walk into a store and get natural products in the DR. The shelves are very empty, I've tried. So an entire industry of bloggers who actually on Instagram has set up Instagram stores to distribute to people has sort of come about. So since I was in the field last summer, being like, oh, is there anything happening? There's been like a huge explosion of natural hair in the DR, which is super exciting. But yeah. And so with the last few minutes that I have, I'll just kind of briefly mention some of like the challenges and like the ways that, is it 1:45 so they finish?
I can't see the clock.
Oh, it's 1:42 right now.
Okay, well then, let it rip. Or, do we have a lot, I mean, there was a lot of good interactive parts of the presentation. Do we have burning questions, or would you like to hear the wrap-up of this? It might be good because what you'll be doing is emphasizing, going back to the fact that this is celebratory, but it's also, these folks are in jeopardy, as you said. This is, they are attacked, they are discriminated against, and this is, that we can't forget that this is about combating racism. That, as you say, aesthetic citizenship is directly connected to racial and gender and class discrimination.
Yeah, I think it'll be good for me to wrap up with that. And you can reach me on the Twitter and also via email. And so you can find me and you can ask me questions. Very, very open. I also have a blog where you can like engage and leave comments and questions. So I just want to kind of talk about the limits of this and the challenges of it. So the first challenge that I have noticed is that natural hair in the DR is dismissed as like a style or a fashion that will pass. This is just the youth, and they're doing this to be rebellious, and it'll pass, and they'll go back to being normative. And time will only tell what will happen. Another example, so for example, like using natural hair in like the bank ads for the national bank, but never employing women who actually look like that to provide service, right? So these are some of like the ways in which it's being kind of co-opted and commoditized for the purpose of kind of like serving these institutions, but it's not actually shifting institutions sometimes. Another challenge is the fact that like so far, like no institutional court claim around natural hair has been filed. So there isn't on file a claim yet of discrimination, and that's very problematic because it means that we're not necessarily moving towards changing public policy around how African descendants are treated in these institutions, so that Nicky's case is not repeated over and over again. Another challenge is the fact that there is a not a total, but a significant generational disconnect between these activists of the 60s and 70s and this kind of young, digitally connected generation. There's a big gap between these two parties that I'm interested in thinking about for how this moves forward. Another challenge has to do with race and class, right? I have a picture here of a Asian woman who is a hair braider, who braids hair at the beach, and so there are women who have been doing natural hair who are Haitian or of Haitian descent, and they do natural hair on the avenue under the sun, not necessarily in these more fancy salon spaces, right? So how is their work being displayed when Dominican women are now engaging with natural hair and receiving like Cantu advertising funds for it, or Shea Moisture advertising funds, where a hair braider, you know, in the Avenida Duarte, who's of Haitian descent, would not be getting these funds. And so, how does this empower like working class women, if at all, is another question that I have. And then the last really big question for me is like, can natural hair translate into like authentic solidarity politics between Dominicans and Haitians? Or is this gonna be, or is it not gonna be that, right? These are like big questions for me as I go back to the field this summer. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for the fabulous participation as always. You make me very proud. I show up all the time, but then you have to prove it, and you always do. So remember,